Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for watching our online lecture on Global One Health and international collaboration in health. I am Maassen Boer, and this lecture is organized by SIP Utrecht, the Student Association for International Relations in Utrecht. We organize an intellectual activity every Tuesday, and due to circumstances surrounding coronavirus, these activities are currently online. Tonight we'll have two lectures by Kitty Maassen from the Cohesion Project from the RIVM and Ludo Hellebrekers, professor at Wageningen University and expert on Global One Health. Feel free to ask your questions during the talk if you can't follow. Afterwards, there will be time for a discussion and all the questions. So ask your questions in the chat on Facebook and YouTube. One final matter before I give the word to Kitty Maassen is that each year a speaker is selected for the Best Speaker of the Year award, and therefore we would like your feedback after the talk, the link for which can be found in the description and end screen. Now, without further ado, I would like to give the word to Kitty Maassen.
Thank you, Maassen. Well, thank you for inviting us to this meeting, this lecture that I'm happy to present. As you already told, my name is Kitty Maassen and I work at the National Institute for Public Health and the Environment, the RIVM, which everyone knows by now. Due to this COVID crisis, I'm head of the department Animal and Vector, which is part of the Center of Zoonosis and Environmental Microbiology. So I will start my sharing my screen. And I would like to tell a little bit more on how we are dealing with the emerging or re-emerging zoonosis in a One Health approach, and how we would like to extend this from national to international. So since what I understood, we have a large diversity of people in the audience, and not everyone is aware of One Health. So what is One Health? It's there are many definitions for One Health. It's a collaborative effort of multidisciplinary working together locally, nationally, and globally to obtain optimal health for people, animals, and our environment. So the main thing is that it's cross disciplines, cross sectors, at different levels, working together for health of people, animals, and the environment, as you can see in this graph as well. So One Health is in the middle. It can also be between two sectors. So for instance, public health and animal health. When we talk about zoonosis, so those are infectious diseases that can be transmitted from animals to people. But we also know it's the other way around in COVID, where we have seen that the SARS coronavirus 2 can also be transmitted from people to animals. That's what we call an anthropozoonosis, and that that falls in the same category. And when we talk about zoonosis, those are intrinsically already linked between human, animals, and also environmental health. So that is a natural topic, basically, to start working in the area of animal health. So normally I have an interactive presentation, and one of my questions normally is, which percentage of the human infectious diseases is zoonotic? And of course, I'm going to give the answer now myself. It's about 2/3. So that means that all the different diseases that exist, infectious diseases that exist, that about 2/3 is coming from animals, and then and can be transferred to people. But many of those, or several of those, become eventually human-to-human transmissible diseases, like COVID-19, but other examples are, for instance, HIV. Okay, if we look at those infectious zoonotic diseases, and you think about those that are emerging, so that are increasing in numbers, or are that are increasing in numbers, or that are new diseases such as coronavirus 2. When you look at this picture, then you see that the green areas are not that exciting, but the more yellow or red it becomes, the higher the anticipated risk is. And when you look at zoonoses that come from wildlife, you see that the northern part of Europe and also the Netherlands is anticipated to be a high risk area. And actually that's true for all the squares. So also for non-wildlife zoonoses, or vector-borne zoonoses, or resistant pathogens, so the antimicrobial resistant pathogens. So in that respect, if you look at this publication from Jones in Nature, the Netherlands is a high-risk country. And that is mainly due to the fact that we have a small country with a high number of people and a very dense population of livestock animals, but also wildlife animals and pet animals. So when we look at what has happened in the past couple of decades, we have experienced several zoonotic outbreaks. We had in 2003 high pathogenic avian influenza, which also caused illness in the people that culled the animals, or we had MRSA, livestock-associated MRSA, which was also a disease that first appeared in the Netherlands, mainly in pigs. But the most important one, and that you're all aware of, is the Q fever epidemic from 2007 to 2010. And that made that we have decided that after that outbreak of Q fever, we installed a so-called zoonosis structure.
Yeah, if I can interrupt.
Meine, yes, go ahead.
So someone from the audience asked, what exactly are vector-borne pathogens?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, very good question. So vector-borne pathogens are a vector is basically something that carries something from one point to another. And in this case, vector-borne means that we look at ticks or insects, like mosquitoes, that can transmit from a person via a tick to another person. Those are vector-borne pathogens. One important one in the Netherlands is Lyme's disease, where from animals the pathogen is transferred into a tick, and then a tick can infect people. And a new one in the Netherlands, a new vector-borne disease, is West Nile fever. West Nile fever, which occurred actually just in the autumn of 2020 for the first time in the Netherlands, which is widespread amongst Europe, and that goes from a bird to a mosquito to a person, and there it stops actually. So we can't transmit it further. Same for Lyme's disease. Yeah, I hope that's clear. Very good question. Okay, then I'll continue. Why a zoonosis structure? Like I said, so we had several of those outbreaks, and it turned out that it was quite difficult to connect public health and animal health. So everyone works in their own column, and before there was a good connection, the disease already exploded, you could say. So therefore, there were recommendations from the Commission Van Dijk and also from a big consortium, Emerging Zoonosis, to recommend that we should improve this early warning and also the control of emerging zoonosis. So the zoonosis structure is an integrated human veterinary risk analysis structure. I'll explain that in a second, for efficient signaling, risk assessment, and control of emerging zoonosis in the Netherlands. So this is how this structure looks. I won't go in too much detail, but what is important of this structure is that basically all tasks and responsibilities are arranged. So in the operationalization, so the execution, the risk management, policy, and communication. And to go back one slide. So on the left side, I don't know whether you can see my arrow, we have a signaling forum. This is a group of people that come together every month, and they everyone brings in their own signals. And so there are people from the RIVM, there are people from the Faculty of Animal Health, there are people from our Food Safety Authority, there are people from Wageningen Bioveterinary Research, from which Ludo is a director, Dutch Wildlife Health Center, Public Health Services. So a big group of people from both veterinary health, animal health, veterinary health, human health, and food safety that come together and assess whether there are signals in the country that need to be checked, whether they are a potential risk for public health. And that is in this first column or first group, and there is a whole lot of other groups that have different tasks. I won't go into detail. What's important is that in all these groups, different sectors are represented. And eventually, if there's something big going on, the ministers of agriculture and health decide. So when you look at Q fever, we were in a crisis. And I have another, so there are some newspaper articles here, even I think the latest one is from 2019, so it's still a crisis for some people. And this is an example of the UK, who had a big crisis of BSE in so the mad cow's disease. And the UK and the Netherlands both organized such a zoonosis structure after a crisis. And that's not, well, the good thing is that, like the crisis that we're going through now, is that governments are willing to act because they see the emergency of it. However, it would be so much nicer if you could do those things in peacetime. So therefore, we started or did a proposal for a international project called Cohesive, which stands for One Health Structure in Europe. So one of the things that we wanted to do is to support other countries to organize also the collaboration between animal health and public health and food safety, to set up such a zoonosis structure. And for us, it was important because we feel that also at the European level, there is quite something to gain. But then, therefore, it's important that in every country at the national level, it's already organized well. So the aim of this project is to develop a sustainable develop the sustainable One Health approaches with respect to signaling, assessing, responding, and controlling zoonosis at the national and regional level. So, so those four terms together, signaling, assessing, responding, and controlling, is what we call risk analysis. So I already explained the zoonosis structure. In this project, we call it a One Health system. So basically with the same definition as I just used. And it's, like I already said, support countries with setting up and strengthening One Health collaboration in the area of risk analysis of zoonosis. So this is just to show you the collaborators that we have. I didn't count them, but there are like, I think 12 countries involved. Several or quite a few have both animal health and public health involved, and some food safety. And this is the organization. So in the middle, there is this risk analysis structure that we would like to implement in all these countries, but there are many more tasks related to it. So this is actually typically, if you look at a scientific organization of a scientific project internationally, which is organized in work packages, this can be a typical scheme for that. So I'll just show you one of the examples that we're trying to make these guidelines to support these countries by making a website. So it's, on top it's the first landing page, and here on the bottom is showing the steps that countries have to take before they can start such a One Health system. I just wanted to show you before my time is passed, because this is not really a scientific project. It's what we call an integrative project. So the main thing is that together with all these countries, we make a co-creation together. We develop something where many countries can benefit from. And we are involved in this project with public health institutes, animal health institutes, and food safety authorities. And that means that we always all have a policy side to it, which is very important. And therefore, I just wanted to show you some of the major players internationally in the area of infectious diseases. So in the middle here is the European Committee, which in this case of this particular project, cohesive is important because it's the EU gives a lot of money for scientific research. And in this construction, it's what they call a European joint program. So there's a large project called One Health European joint program, and this cohesive project is just one of the projects in that program, which is actually funded by the national ministries. So in our case, the Ministry of VWS and the Ministry of LNV, and they basically co-fund this project. If we let the project go for a second, other players, so in red are the public health or the human health players, on the right side in blue the animal health and agricultural players, and this is a picture from the Staat van Zoonose, which we publish every year, looking at the trends of zoonotic diseases in the Netherlands. And in Europe, there are two major players. It's the ECDC, which is the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, and the EFSA, which is the European Food Safety Authority. And at the international or at the global level, we have WHO, which you all know, the World Health Organization, but in the area of zoonotic diseases, also the OEA, the World Organization of Animal Health, and the Food Agriculture Organization play an important role. And what they have done in about 10 years ago, in 2010, they have formed a so-called tripartite of those three organizations. And they have agreed that they share responsibility and coordinate global activities to address health risks at the animal, human, and ecosystem interfaces. And one of the things that they have done is they have made a tripartite guide to address zoonotic diseases in countries. So basically, this is a similar kind of guideline that we are developing for Europe. They have done that at the global scale, but also in a much broader sense. So not only for risk analysis, but all kind of action plans for and surveillance systems for all countries in the world. Here are some other examples. So for instance, the WHO, they have an important guide, the international health regulations that all countries, or I think almost all countries in the world apply to. And this is an example of ECDC and EFSA, who together make every year a joint report, a joint zoonosis report with all the zoonotic diseases and the status in Europe. I think I am past my time, so actually I would like to stop and maybe give some thought for discussion on how it is to work in an international project. So the cohesive project I am coordinating, which is a lot of fun. Like I said, we do a lot of co-creation, but it's also complex. It is not always easy. It is sometimes very difficult to engage people. On the other hand, it's great for networking, and it's a lot of fun. But maybe you can have some questions related to this word cloud. And therefore, and then I would like to stop with my last slide. You can't predict the future, and we now all know that we definitely can't predict the future, but we can try to prepare for it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Kitty. That was very interesting. So then I will give the word to Ludo Hellebrekers, who will continue our story.
All right. Thank you very much. I will wait for Kitty to stop sharing, and then I will start, or at least try sharing. There we go. And if all goes well. I hope that you're seeing something else than I'm seeing. Yes, there we go. Can somebody confirm that you see a full screen, Meine?
Yes, I can see.
All right. Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Ludo Hellebrekers. Just to introduce myself, I'm trained as a veterinarian. I've worked in academia for a very long time, but also was active in the Professional Association of Veterinarians in the Netherlands. And in that situation, I was very much part of the whole discussion together with the colleagues from the RIVM, like Kitty and others, on the whole discussion at the time that we had our struggles with Q fever, but also in the whole discussion on antimicrobial use, antibiotic use, antimicrobial use in animals and its consequences for antimicrobial resistance in humans. A couple of years ago, I switched to Wageningen University and Research, WUR for short, and I'm now working as director of the institute called Wageningen Bioveterinary Research, of which I will explain a little bit in the next slide, and then also show you what the relevance for the whole topic is. The focus of today, as far as my presentation is concerned, the focus of today concerns the RACE program, which we have within Wageningen University and Research have recently set up to, well, in essence, to even better prepare ourselves for a next pandemic, because I think it has become quite clear to everybody that despite all the good efforts that we did, and we did a lot of work, we made a lot of progress, and there are things that we can rightly be very proud of in the recent past, this COVID pandemic has shown that we, the world, that is not the Netherlands, but the world, is not adequately prepared for such an outbreak. And the question, of course, is, will we ever be totally prepared? But I think we can do a better job. And that's what this whole initiative is all about. Like I said, I'm the director of Wageningen Bioveterinary Research, one of the research organizations that is primarily, and has been for the last 100+ years that we are in existence, has been an infectious diseases institute, looking into infectious diseases, but not so much into the infectious diseases of humans, but primarily in the past, primarily infectious diseases in animals. But a couple of years ago, the switch was made, and that is about 2 decades ago, the switch was made when we discovered that more and more, and this is something of the last 15 to 20 years, more and more of these infectious diseases in animals also had severe health consequences for humans. And the Q fever is one of the examples, the antimicrobial resistance is one of the examples, the mad cow disease, as Kitty already mentioned, is one of the examples that everybody heard about. And now, of course, we have influenza, avian influenza, we have some swine influenza. That's not a major problem, but avian influenza can be a problem, also for humans. And now, of course, we've had SARS-1, we've had MERS in dromedary and camel-like animals in the Middle East, and now we have SARS-2, which affects humans primarily, but also affected mink, for instance. This is what Kitty was referring to. So the mission statement of Wageningen Bioveterinary Research is to work on supporting and improving animal and human health by studying, preventing, and combating infectious diseases. But the nice thing, as far as I'm concerned, the nice thing about Wageningen Bioveterinary Research Institute is that we are part of a larger family. We're part of the Wageningen University. And for the older generation, so that's not the generation that's listening now, I presume, but for my generation, I guess, Wageningen was 20, 25, 30 years ago was known as an agricultural university. And that has changed quite a bit. And we have changed as Wageningen Bioveterinary Research, we've changed. We're looking at infectious disease in animals as well as in humans. And within Wageningen, in the whole Wageningen University and Research, the collective know-how and the added value of Wageningen arises from the fact that we cover a whole number of different fields of natural sciences, ecosystem sciences, plant sciences, animal sciences, as well as social and economic sciences. And hence, the possibility that if we combine all that knowledge and combine all that expertise, we can actually help creating scientific breakthroughs that can help the world, can not only be put into practice, but can also help improving education, and which of course is a very important part of our daily work. And I think that combined approach really is the Wageningen approach, of which I'm indeed very proud, in case you hadn't noticed yet. So this basically shows a bit of the structure of Wageningen University, but and I'm not sure whether you can see, well, at the top you can see the 5 columns which depict the 5 science groups within Wageningen University and Research. And there's agrotechnology and food sciences, there is plant sciences, there's environmental sciences and social sciences and social economic sciences, and of course also the animal sciences group, to which my institute also belongs. And then there's a sort of merger between the Wageningen University and the Wageningen Research Institutes, Wageningen University, the academic institute for the more fundamental knowledge, and the Wageningen Research Institute for the high-level applied knowledge. So by combining the fundamental and the founding research, we can try and work on solutions for the future. And we do that, as Kitty also mentioned, the whole idea behind becoming effective in this field of work and in this field of expertise is by making sure that you approach these challenges from a more holistic point of view. And therefore, I think it's very important to stress once again and support Kitty's statement in that, support and state once again that a One Health approach is critical. You have to consider the interplay between health and resilience of both people and animals and ecosystems at every level, at the local level, regional level, global level. It doesn't matter. But you will not, that is the firm belief from the One Health workers in this day and age. You will not succeed, you will not become effective if you look at one of these silos only. If you only look at the animal side, if you only look at the human side, if you only look at the ecosystem side, you're not going to be successful, because it's all about the interface between ecosystems and animals, and ecosystems and humans and animals. So you have to follow this integrative approach. Now, as mentioned, we were hit by this COVID explosion and this pandemic. But the question, of course, is, did we know that it was coming? Well, we knew it was going to come one day, because in all the reports in the last 2 decades, we were always talking about disease X, the unknown disease that we didn't know about yet, that we hadn't characterized yet, but we knew it was coming to hit us in the face at one time. And this present COVID pandemic, or even though we had SARS-1, how many years ago? 5, 8, 9 years ago, can't remember. And we had the MERS, the Middle East respiratory syndrome outbreak in, like I said, in dromedary and camel-like animals, and humans as well. But now, quite unexpectedly, and we weren't quite adequately prepared, we were hit by this pandemic. And there's one thing for sure, just as sure as we knew in the past, but we are sure that there will be a next pandemic at one time. There will be new emerging infectious diseases after COVID. And you could say, well, the last major pandemic was the Spanish flu early in the last century. But and then you could conclude perhaps that it will be another 100 years before we will be hit by a pandemic again. But that is certainly not the case. It's the firm belief of everybody that knows anything about it that these pandemics will follow up at a higher pace. Kitty already mentioned in the last 5 to 10 years, we've had SARS-1, we had MERS, we have had the West Nile virus recently in the Netherlands, a couple of years ago, starting also in the United States. We've had Zika 2-3 years ago in South America. We had, of course, the Ebola a couple of years ago. And all of these pandemics originally stemmed from, are zoonotic of nature, stem from animals. So the question arises is, what can we learn from this current pandemic? How can we use the lessons learned, that the insights that we've gained now, to be better prepared for the next future pandemic? And Wageningen University and Research decided to start what we call the Erase at Were initiative. And the ERASE acronym stands for Early Recognition, because that is critically important. Rapid action in zoonotic emergencies. And that is basically what we're all about. And if you talk about disaster management, and if you take up the handbooks in disaster management, there are always 4 phases in disaster management. The first one, of course, is how do you handle prevention? How do you make sure that the preventative actions taken are adequate and timely? The second is preparedness. The third step then, of course, is the response when the outbreak is actually there. And the last one in the disaster management learn cycle would be recovery, but most importantly, perhaps also what are the lessons learned for the next time. And anybody who knows anything about quality control might recognize this circle. It's almost like the plan, do, check, act circle. How can you continuously work on improving your act? How can you continuously work on improving your general setup? And to show you some brief examples of what we are presently setting up and doing, and for very important, this is a collaborative effort. It is a multidisciplinary effort, and not only from all the science groups within Wageningen, but also very much in collaboration with the human counterparts like RIVM and Erasmus University and the Netherlands Center for One Health. That is on a national basis, but this is also something that we're going to be doing in a European consortium and working together with exactly that tripartite group that Kitty mentioned, the tripartite consortium from the FAO, WHO, and the OIE, added on by the United Nations. Because this is a global challenge. Just as we are not going to solve it if you think in silos as far as human, animal, and ecosystem is concerned, you're not going to solve this, as becomes adequately clear, if you want to solve this at a national level. It does have to be transboundary, otherwise you're not going to be successful. That is obvious. Now, when you're looking at prevention, you're looking at identifying and characterizing hotspots. What are hotspots? Hotspots are areas in the world where zoonotic emergencies are more likely to occur than elsewhere. That's where the ecology comes in. That's where the human-animal interface comes in. That's where wildlife management comes in. And that's where we need to focus on trying to prevent this transport from the infectious agent, the pathogen, from animals to humans, to prevent this spillover event. And that, of course, doesn't only apply to the tropics and to Africa or Asian part of the world, that also applies to the agro food system. So there is, in the preventive thinking, you need to think about redesigning your agri food systems. We need that food, that's obvious, but you need to think about redesigning it so that you can conserve biodiversity, produce enough food, but still limit the risk associated with it. That is as far as examples, as far as prevention is concerned. When you're talking preparedness, surveillance and early warning, that is of the utmost importance. We have to further develop, because they are there, these systems for early warning and early recognition and warning, they are there, but they need to be enlarged, they need to be professionalized to a higher level. Not only do we need to know where these new pathogens occur, but we also need to be able to characterize them, to more fully understand how these pathogens move across the world. As an example, think about avian influenza. Avian influenza comes from the higher northern part of Russia, by birds flying in the winter, flying towards our area of the woods. But you need to know whether these pathogens, this influenza virus, is the same virus when it arrives in the Netherlands or in Denmark or in somewhere in Middle Europe. So you need to characterize, you need to to characterize the DNA setup of these pathogens to fully understand what is going on. And also to know whether you're looking at new pathogens or whether you're still looking at the old-fashioned or already well or better known pathogens. You need to work on creating vaccine platforms where you can not only develop platforms, but develop vaccines, but also adapt these vaccines. So when a new strain occurs, you can produce your vaccines fit to that strain of pathogen. So those are examples of how you prepare yourself once an outbreak is imminent. Now, of course, when the outbreak is already there, this is something you will recognize. The keywords are testing, testing, testing. And of course, then following that, following a positive test, the tracing. That's exactly what is being done in the human corona situation, but that is all over, whether it's animal or human. And then biosecurity. This is something that's very hard, but that is exactly the reason that this is online rather than in a pub or a lecture hall. And biosecurity actually means that you try and contain groups of, in our case, people, but also when you're talking livestock animals, and contain animals at a farm and prevent other pathogens from coming in. We have to work on creating new vaccines. That is being done for humans. That's being done for animals. We have to work on creating antivirals. We have to work on developing new antibiotics, antimicrobial agents to combat bacterial infections. And we have to learn to think in terms of well-designed and well-evaluated intervention strategies. And lastly, but certainly not least, and if you follow the news, you know there's a lot of discussion about it, a lot of criticism about it. Risk communication is of utmost importance as well. And then the last phase, when it's done, and we're not there yet, but we know that we will be there at one time, we have to assess how things worked and what the consequences were. And we are going to be working on looking on the consequences and opportunities for the agro food systems, how we can improve those at the short, middle, and long term in a long-term approach. And learn more about spillover effects and events, and make sure that we make the most of all the things that we've been confronted with. And therefore, Wageningen has brought together this whole ARRAISE program. It's a huge program. It's going to run at least 3 years. It consists of approximately 20 million euros, of which 6.5 million euros is going to be financed by Wageningen itself, and the rest is going to be, we need to get funding for that at European level and global level, and we will be working on that together with our partners over the different disciplines, but also with our partners in the human field within and outside the Netherlands. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And now I'm trying to shut down.
So thank you too for a very interesting talk. So I think we can continue to with some questions that have come rolling in. So
let them have them.
So first of all, question by Anouk. So you mentioned the integrative approach between environment, animals, humans. Do you think that after the current pandemic, people will finally realize the importance of this One Health approach?
Yeah, that's a good question. I see Kitty smiling. I'll be honest, I'm an optimistic person. So my answer is yes. But the yes is not 100% yes either. Let's face it, people. There are still humans on this earth that deny that there is a climate change and climate crisis. Just as there are those kind of people. There are also kind of people that still do not believe that we need to follow a fully integrative approach. So yeah, we're not there yet, but we'll keep on preaching. Kitty, you put on your microphone. Yeah, preach.
Yeah, because what I already said, we went through a crisis before we got the government moving to take the action to set up a system for early warning and response. And I think that this COVID crisis will make that also in other countries, at least this is the momentum to get it done. So like Ludo said, it will not be done everywhere and to the full extent, but I'm absolutely sure and optimistic that there will be steps made also towards an integrative approach for zoonotic diseases in general.
See, I'm right. Optimistic person.
Yeah. Okay, so I actually also had a question of my own, and you already mentioned the West Nile virus and global warming. So, because as I understand, part of the reason why the West Nile virus is now also in the mosquitoes that have the virus are now also in the Netherlands is tied to global warming. Do you think that's that's not true?
Finish your question first.
Okay, so what I was wondering, does global warming increase the need for international collaboration in One Health? So, because I was wondering, these are problems that are relatively new for us, right? Mosquito-borne diseases, but are very common, you know, in other climates.
So first, a response to the fact that climate change is due for the fact that we have West Nile virus. I'm not an entomologist, so an entomologist is someone who knows about very
mosquitoes,
knowledgeable on vectors and insects mainly. But what I understood from the entomologists in my group is that when you think about these vector-borne diseases, you have to have everything right. So the vectors, the mosquitoes, actually for West Nile virus, we already have them. They're just endemic viruses that are mosquitoes that are around us for many, many years. The only thing is that you have to have the birds that have them, you have to have the mosquitoes, you have to have the pathogen, and you have to have the right circumstances, but they can be very local. But what we see is that indeed this West Nile virus is kind of, you know, moving up towards the north of Europe, so that it might have something to do with climate. My entomologist said, I knew it was coming. She said that 10 years ago, but she didn't know whether it would be this year, last year, or maybe it could have also been another 10 years past from now. But it happened last year. So climate change, you know, the 1 + 1 is not as simple as it sounds. But anyway, having said that, when you think about these vector-borne diseases, there is a absolutely good network already in Europe on exchanging information, mapping all the vectors, so the mosquitoes, the ticks, the sandflies, and so forth, and the diseases that go around it. And actually, one of those projects is called VectorNet that we're currently leading. So this is indeed an absolute good example where it's crucial to help each other with the knowledge on these diseases, but also on the vectors and how they spread and how they move. And I think Ludo can remember the Smallenberg virus as a day of yesterday. when I was talking about this zoonosis structure, which started in 2011, so almost 10 years ago, the first crisis that we had was Smallenberg virus, which was a virus transmitted by midges, so very small, mosquitoes, you could say. I don't know.
Yeah, knutjes in Dutch.
Knutjes in Dutch, yeah. And it's a long story, but it led to malformation, born calves and lambs that were completely malformed, and it was dramatic. And there was, of course, the question whether it was a zoonosis as well, which turned out not to be the case. But coming to your question, so indeed, it was very important that we had these contacts, also to know about both the mosquitoes or the midges and the pathogens that are present in them. Yeah.
If I could add, add on that, I totally agree with what you're saying, but I just want to add is that there is a concern. It's very hard to, as Katie explains, it's very hard to prove that there's a one-to-one relationship between climate change and the West Nile virus in the Netherlands. But having said that, if you look at these patterns of diseases that originally were seen in the African continent, coming up to the Mediterranean, coming up to Middle Europe, coming up to Northwestern Europe, where we're at, that doesn't only happen with zoonosis, it also happens with blue tongue, for instance, which is a disease in animals. We are looking at things like Rift Valley fever, which is something that was actually, I mean, it stems from the Moroccan area in Africa, but it is now seen in other parts of, not on, but off the African continent. So the worry is there. It's certainly not a one-on-one relationship. It also has to do with our own behavior. Let's face it. If you want to point fingers, your generation, Meine, is, and I see that in my kids, and I wish they could do it every day, but they are traveling all the world before they're 25. They've seen all continents in the world. So that intensified travel, air travel, but also the intensified intrusion of natural habitats in the tropics that used to be untouched and are now, by whether it's Western Europeans or Africans, doesn't matter, is now part of that human-animal interface. That all contributes to these changes that we see. So it's not a simple puzzle, but they are factors that are of relevance.
Yes. Okay. So that's also good to know.
That was a good question, Meine.
Yes. there goes the holiday plan.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
window.
Currently we can't really go on holiday. So.
No.
No, but this will hold true. This will hold true next year as well. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay. So I also have a question from Maya. First of all, thanks you both for the very interesting talks. You, Mr. Hellebreker, mentioned that scientists already knew disease X was coming. Maybe I missed it, but can you explain more about how?
We didn't know it was coming. We predicted it was coming. In earlier reports from the RIVM, in the EMSO report, when was that?
2010?
2010 or something, 2010, 11. The RIVM, National Institute of Health and Environment, made a big report on which pathogens are going to hit us in the next couple of years. And there was a whole list of things. But disease X was there because we always knew that there are so many more viruses that we do not know yet, that we're not familiar with yet, that we haven't found yet. And actually, to be totally honest, this SARS corona isn't, I mean, it's new, obviously, and it hits us in the face, obviously, but in itself, it's not a totally new virus. It's related to the old coronavirus. It's from a couple of years ago. It's related to the MERS virus, but there are a number of coronaviruses, nephews and nieces of the present SARS coronavirus, in the animal kingdom, in the livestock sector, where some of these species become slightly ill, some of them become hardly ill. So coronaviruses as such are not new. But it is certainly not unlikely that we will be hit by something that is even stranger to us. That is something that we need to think about now in peacetime, how we are going, and that's exactly what everybody is now working on, and that's exactly what the Erase program is also working on. How are we going to organize ourselves to be better prepared? That's basically, in a nutshell, what it is all about. Because the effects of this crisis, of course, health-wise, economic-wise, and we're sitting in a relatively comfortable situation in the Netherlands. And I know that many people died. I'm aware of that. But think about even developed countries like the United States. Think about lower middle income countries in the African continent, in Asia. So yeah, this is a disaster of the very biggest order.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a question from Benjamin. Also, thank you for the talk. And he's wondering, what are the dangers of bird flu for humans, and how is this different from the dangers for birds?
Yeah, then you need to talk to. We have within my institute, we have people who are very smart and know all about avian influenza, and I'm not one of them. But I can answer this question, I think, to a certain level. The problem with bird flu is there is not a bird flu. There are many subtypes of bird flu. I will spare you the technicalities, but they are just as related as you are to your brother and your cousins, etc. So there are differences. That's one thing. The level of illness that you see in birds depends on the type of bird flu and or the subtype of bird flu, and then also depends on what kind of bird you're talking about. And I know that chickens aren't birds, but if you're talking about chickens or ducks or talingen, the widgeons or something in English, a very difficult word. Talingen, that's a special kind of duck, or geese, those you know, or swans. They respond differently to different subtypes. So having said all that, just over the weekend or on Friday, I can't remember, Kitty, could you? There was news from Russia where five workers of poultry farm had become infected with H5N5, if I remember correctly, and they had mild symptoms and had recovered. But having said that, a different subtype about 15 years ago, about 100 people got in the Netherlands alone. 100 people got seriously ill, and one died of bird flu. Another type than we're looking at today. A definitely and totally other type of bird flu than we're looking at today. But there are many types of flus, just as there are many types of human flus that go around. Different type of flus that go around in the swine population. So there is no one single shot to prevent it either. That's one of the challenges.
Maybe I can add what we know up to now, that the bird flus that are in the Netherlands, so the one that Ludo referring to in 2003 was H7N7, doesn't matter. So now it's H5N8. But they, and also the Russian people that got infected, they all were in very close contact with those animals. So like I already said in my presentation, there were the collars, so the people who who killed the birds and got rid of them when they had to clean out a stable with thousands of animals. So the viral load, the number of viruses that were present in the air at that time were extremely high. So if you inhale a lot of viruses, you have a higher chance of getting ill. On the other hand, and that is the danger that everyone is afraid of, is there is an example in Asia. It's a completely different type as the ones that are now circulating. That they hardly give disease in poultry, so chickens and those kind of animals, but they are highly infectious and causing disease in animals, in humans. So those are the ones that are frightening because you don't see them. Now in the Netherlands, the system is in a way that as soon as chickens get ill, everything is checked and tested and isolated or cold or whatever. So the chance of reaching people is not that high. But when you have those dangerous species, those dangerous strains, that is.
And the other thing that we do nowadays, of course, and that we do that with COVID as well in Rotterdam, that we sequence these viruses, do DNA sequencing, so that we know exactly whether it's you or whether it's your brother or whether it's your cousin. So we know exactly what is happening, how related or unrelated these different cases are, whether animal cases or human cases, doesn't matter. So that's why characterization has become so of utmost importance. But that also means that you have to set up labs that are ready to roll when the shit hits the fan, and are ready to roll and do hundreds of sequences within a weekend. Because if it takes you a week, you might as well just count the number of dead subjects, whether it's animals or humans, because then you're too late, because they are viruses and treatment is mostly rather limited or totally unsuccessful.
Yeah. So I also have another question from Anouk. Bit of an interesting question. Do you fear what virus may come free out of the never before melted Antarctic ice, or might that just be? She even calls it a hoax. But do you think there's any real danger to that?
That's a good question. It's an interesting question. I must admit that I haven't seen any reliable proof, let alone even a sort of reliable suggestion that that might be a big danger. Now the problem is, of course, what you don't know, you can't deny. So I can't say that there is no danger, but compared to all the other challenges that we have at the moment, and that is including COVID, but not exclusively COVID, I would say it's one of the least of my worries. Not a worry at all. I'd be more afraid to go on the highway than afraid to be hit by a frozen pathogen from the permafrost. Kitty, agree?
Yeah, I agree. It's a nice question.
Yeah.
Good to think about, but I think there are indeed other dangers that are much higher.
It's another thing, of course, if you are digging up mammoths from the melted permafrost in Siberia, then I think it would be wise to take the routine precautionary methods. That of course is obvious, but for the general public like you and me, I'm not worried.
Maybe a bit more practical. So you talked about the importance. This is a question from Maya also. The importance of evaluation. Are there already lessons we can take from this pandemic, or is this something for a later stage? I think we can already make lessons. What would be the most important one? So very multi-layered question.
Yeah. Well, I can name one, but let Kitty go first.
Yeah, well, for humans, I don't want to go there. It's always very easy to look back and say everything that goes wrong. But what I also think it's very important to realize And I've been in OMTs, and not for the human part, but for the animals, and all other kind of similar kind of meetings. And you have to realize that the information that's on the table is bigger than what you and me know outside. And also the discussions that go, sometimes you have an idea like, okay, well, we just have to do it like this. And then you come with a suggestion and someone gives some information and like, oh yeah, that was a stupid idea. So I think those you don't have to, you should at least not underestimate how well these meetings normally go. On the other hand, they also don't have the magic stick to have all the answers, and there is a lot of, and we heard that today again by the Prime Minister, weighing. So what the RIVM does together with the whole OMT, the outbreak management team, is just look at things from the public health side. So that's also something that's really important to realize, that we do not take economics and so on into account. We just assess the risk for the medical risk for the public. And what you see is that you gain information throughout the pandemic. You get information and you learn by doing. What I can say for the minks in the Netherlands, I think I can say something there, and I think that we acted really good. Just heard it today about from our Danish colleagues who have the largest mink farming industry in the world, and we are kind of second, I think. Not anymore, because all the minks are dead now. We do not have any mink farms left. But I think that what we did very well was the first mink farms that were contaminated. In the first 4, we did a lot of research, and therefore we gained an enormous amount of information. I think the VBR and the Faculty of Animal Health were very important, together with the Erasmus University and others, to get an enormous amount of information. And therefore, when new mink farms appeared to be contaminated, we had the zoonosis structure that I explained really in place, with an outbreak management team, and decided to call the animals, and from that day onwards, and eventually had the whole industry gone. But I think that the fact that we had those four first farms investigated very closely gave us also the tools to make a good decision, weighed decision on what we should do next. And it also, we had the luck that we could show that there was basically an index case coming into, so it went from people to animals, but also back. Yeah. We had the right information, and I think that was good research, but also good decisions and a little bit of luck maybe. But therefore, I think that we managed it well. What was, of course, very strange is that even though we took an enormous amount of measures, we were not able to control it well. So the contaminated farms kept coming, and
but that also has to do with the structure of the mink industry in the Netherlands.
Yeah. So that will be evaluated, how that went and where. Yeah. But I think in general there are always points to improve. But in general, I think we did well.
Okay.
Yeah. I think what is also interesting, not because one is better than the other, but interesting to compare, to see what you can learn. we have a large agro industry in the Netherlands, very highly organized, well managed, with a very intense monitoring and surveillance systems. And what happens, for instance, with avian influenza, what happens is that the minute there is a suspected case or a suspected farm, these animals are sampled, the samples are tested, the virus is isolated, the virus is sequenced, the farms are locked up, no transport. There's a 3 kilometer radius zone where all the other farms are being checked. There's no transport. This is not from 9 o'clock at night till 5 o'clock in the morning. There's no transport 24/7 until the ban is lifted. And the lab sites, and that's where the notifiable diseases lab, that's how it is called, the official aangifteplichtige dierziekte, the notifiable animal diseases lab that we are, comes in, that the minute you hear that there is a suspected case, you scale up and you make sure that you have the people available, that you have the machinery available, that you have the reagents available, that you have the plastics available. So there's always a stock. And if avian influenza happens in Germany in autumn, you know it's coming close again. It's a matter of, the question is, when are you going to be hit? Not where, if you're going to be hit, and you prepare. And I think what happened in the Netherlands is that same structure in the human health, in the public health field, has for political reasons been diminished and diminished and diminished. And were not set up because they were kept small, and it was called efficient and cost efficient. Well, it's a matter of definition there, in hindsight, of course. So that's, I think, is also one of the lessons that will come out of this evaluation, that we need to be better prepared. And that means that you have, it's almost like a fire brigade. You have to have a fire brigade available and not 50 kilometers away, because then they're going to be too late. Your house will be gone. So those kind of things will be coming back in the evaluation for sure. But you'll be a lot older when that final report comes out, because it will take a couple of years, I think.
Okay, so then the final question of tonight. So is another question. So how can poor countries provide virus prevention, where local people live a very big distance from the university and the government, from the experts? Do you have any views on that?
Well, it's one of the challenges that we have as mankind. That's one thing, and that doesn't just apply to get enough vaccines for COVID in these lower middle income countries, which is one of the things, but also setting up surveillance systems for both human and animal health. The good thing is, and this is something that is not so publicly known and not so obviously seen, but the good thing is there is a lot of collaboration going on between the rich guys and the poor guys, to put it bluntly. There is and that is collaboration. This is not a sort of new wave of colonialism. This is collaboration as equal partners with institutes in Africa, South America, Asia. And never underestimate those guys, because they know they have some catching up to do, but they are working their butts off. So there is collaboration. So there is improved knowledge, and it's only through international collaboration and support systems from United Nations, WHO, FAO, where we collaborate with and contribute to, that this can be brought to a good end, I think. But we have some way to go, but we have a responsibility there as well, in my opinion. But that's my personal opinion. Kitty.
Yeah, so what I mentioned, this tripartite zoonosis guide, which was launched in 2019, they have a a whole program where they can, all countries can do a self, it's how do you say it? It's not like workshops done by WHO, FAO, and OEA, although they can give them, but it's something that a country can do themselves.
It's a
But
capacity building initiative.
It's really capacity building guide, and they are supported by this tripartite by that, and there are also WHO has these so-called bridging workshops. So there is a lot going on, and especially for those countries. And what is, I think, is interesting, because like Ludo said, you never underestimate them. They are doing a lot of things, also have a lot of initiatives in their own countries. But what might be an advantage is that because they have not been evolved that much, and in all fronts, is that by how do you say it? It's easier to set up something from scratch. They can do it immediately in a One Health fashion. Whereas what we try to do is combine systems that are already there. We have a lot of legislation that we have to comply to and all those kind of things, where they can sometimes go from scratch, which sometimes is easier. And that way they can have a very steep curve in coming to a very high level of One Health collaboration. And the examples that I see are impressive.
It's comparable to the telephone industry. Yeah? They skipped the old landlines and went straight from nothing to mobile phones, and that's exactly what Kitty means. That's also the things that they do with these contingency plans for combating infectious diseases, zoonotic infectious diseases. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's a good note to end on. I want to thank you both for a very interesting lectures and interesting discussion. Next week we will have a film lecture where we will watch a documentary on Ruth Bader Ginsburg, followed also by a small lecture. And then before we continue with our traditional drinks on Discord, I would like to remind people to provide the feedback through the links that are in the description and in the chat, if I saw correctly. And then I think that was our talk for the week. So goodbye.
Yes, my pleasure.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.